Reddit by Reddit recap. Students of Reddit. What is something your teacher has done that made you think, wow, how hasn't this person been fired yet? When a fight broke out in the classroom, our maths teacher screamed in the most panicked, fearful screech, "Someone get a teacher." I'm a 24-year-old man, and sometimes I'm in a situation where I'm looking around and I'm just like, I need an adult. I'm 27. My entire life is basically just uttering "I need an adult" under my breath. So I have a couple stories about bad teachers who deserve to be fired. I went to public school in a poor district, so we didn't exactly get the cream of the crop. One experience was amazingly bad though. I had a teacher who didn't teach at all. His class was him putting on a movie every day while the students played cards, dominoes, or chatted. One day a friend and I were listening to an Adam Sandler cassette. The one with the principal who would call girls into his office and masturbate. We were laughing at this part when the teacher came by and asked to listen. He took it to his desk and came back a bit later with 3 detentions for each of us. I was complaining about the situation to another teacher later. This guy was the computer teacher, probably the only teacher in the school who actually had skills. He mentioned to me that the bad teacher had given him a tape to edit. The tape included some pretty inappropriate things. The bad teacher was also the coach for a girls' team, soccer or volleyball, don't remember which. He was making sexual innuendo to them, zooming into their breasts, etc. Of course this is high school, so they are all underage. Good teacher was on the fence if he should report it, and I encouraged him to do so. Staring back to show proper dominance. Smart. This is creepy. Teacher. Called black and white primary colors. Pronounced gouache gouache. Threw a kid against a wall for back-talking her and damn near broke her arm. One of those things is not like the others. First one definitely. My sophomore algebra teacher was known in the school for being the biggest a-hole, but he was tenured so he knew he was safe. After one particularly brutal test he must have gotten some complaints from the students because in the next class he handed out articles to everyone about how self-esteem doesn't exist and it doesn't matter. WTF. That makes no sense. How can anyone claim that there is no such thing as self-esteem? It's like saying that people can't actually feel hunger or pain. A history class in 7th grade. Every day he would sit outside the classroom before the bell would ring and talk to the teacher next door until it was 10 minutes into the period. Then he would turn on the news and say, "History is happening around us. Learn it as it happens." Then he would snack on Little Debbie's and read the newspaper for an hour. Not gonna lie though, that was hysterical. Awful teacher but funny. I had a middle school teacher that spoke with extremely broken English and yet taught English literature class. How he even got chosen to teach that class I don't know. He wasn't good at teaching anything. But that wasn't the thing. Or rather, things. He would assign homework and it was 50/50 whether or not he'd actually collect it the next day. I don't mean forget. He would just dismiss it. Or when he collected quizzes, he would take them to his desk and it was abundantly clear he wasn't reading anything other than the name, and grade them all in a couple of minutes. Everyone either got an A or a C. If you questioned him about it he'd angrily tell you to sit down. Any kind of class reading or lecture, he would have students read out the material while he stood in the corner with his arms crossed. He made it clear that he was not happy to be there. Or sometimes we would do nothing. He would not even look up from his desk. Just tell us to read from your textbooks until the bell rang. On PTA nights he would be there, because he was required to. But he would lock his door and ignore anyone who knocked. There were so many complaints against him from parents, students and some other teachers, but the school administration didn't care. God, I hated every shitty day at that school. Nobody wanted to be there, less that the people who worked there. This is me right now in high school. For some odd reason, the administration loves hiring people who have thick accents. I could not understand my algebra teacher who was from Pakistan. It led me to switch to a different class because I was failing already. I used to have a physics chemistry teacher who had been a teacher at my school for 20-30 years and his accent was still so thick that it was next to impossible to understand him. He also didn't really speak English and was really bitter because none of the large universities here would hire him to be a researcher/professor for them. Attended a private school where our uniform was a polo tucked into khakis. Our principal walked up to a girl who had her shirt untucked and proceeded to put his hand down her pants to tuck it in for her. From the front. Nonetheless. I had this English teacher in high school who doesn't like taking criticism or anything that involves telling her that she is wrong. So during halfway through the semester, our teacher decided to post our marks. My friend and I checked to see what kind of mark we got with the bullshit we've written all semester. I got 75% while my friend got a whopping 1081%. My friend was confused while I was wondering what kind of bullshit did he write to get that mark. Obviously it was a mistake, so we decided to let the teacher know about it. When we did, she started to throw a fit and yelling at us that she made no mistakes. By the time she started yelling, the whole class already noticed the 1081% that my friend got, and decided not to say anything since we all knew she wouldn't listen. By the time class ended, the whole class decided to give my friend a pat on the back, mentioning how he is gonna get a full ride scholarship and congratulating him for getting the highest possible mark in existence. That 1081% stayed that way for the rest of the semester, and my friend decided to duck around to see how low of a mark he can get before the semester ended. By the time we got our report cards for the semester, the teacher finally corrected the mistake, and due to my friend's duckery, he fortunately got a passing grade of 53%. He honestly didn't care about the grade but was slightly disappointed that the teacher wasn't prideful enough to leave the 1081%. On the subject of teachers refusing to admit when they're wrong, substitutes can be the absolute worst sometimes. There was this kid in my class named Cesare, pronounced Cesare, but everyone thought it was pronounced Caesar like the salad. One day we had a substitute teacher, and when she called out his name for attendance and he told her actually, it's correct pronunciation, she responded, no, your name is incorrect pronunciation. I know how to say your name. You do not know how to say your name. Where do you live that 50% is passing? In NJ where I'm from. As far as I know it's always 60%. Just curious, thanks. My intro to C and Unix professor graded nothing until finals week. Like, not a single damn assignment. Meaning you had no idea whatsoever how you were doing in the class until it was almost over. If you asked him about grades, he'd say he'd have everything graded next week. But next week never came. Blatant violation of university policy. At the drop deadline, all past assignments must be graded. A lot of us suspected that even after finals, nothing actually was graded. He'd just assign grades at random. But without seeing our papers we can't prove it. Also, same guy. If you'd ask him a question about the homework, he'd look at it, scratch his head for a few seconds, and say I don't know. How to do this? Go ask smart kid in the class. Also, same guy again. His tests had almost nothing to do with the lectures. Fortunately, they were all open laptop tests. So we'd basically just Google everything, learn it for the first time on the test, and write that, which, TBH, is probably how all computer science tests should be administered since that's how coding works in the real world. But I can't imagine the department liked that. I heard he was going to be fired. But I've got him for 2 classes this semester. Friendly guy, but staggeringly lazy and incompetent. One of my CS professors this semester practically goes out of his way to make our lives difficult for his class. He has us as a 20-year-old OS so we can use an obscure and poorly documented version of C for all our homework. Partially because we're too dependent of GUIs and partially to specifically make it harder. Homework takes around 8 hours per assignment while working in groups. Each test represents 25% of our grades, with actual problems requiring us to write code. Sometimes from our homework, Sometimes not. He's never had anyone pass his class with an A. And he's damn proud of that fact. If you ask a question he just ignores it or essentially tell you to duck off. We're too dependent of GUIs. That's like saying I want you to read this book. Printed in 10 points font. But I'm taking your glasses because you rely on them too much. That's ducking insane. When my teacher decided to spend the last month of the quarter in Iceland on vacation without telling us he was leaving. He then decided he didn't want to grade any assignments before final grades were due to the school, so he gave every student a B in the class regardless of if they did any work or not. Edit. Words. I also forgot to mention he's now the head of his department. Duck. That. Guy. When I was in culinary school. First trimester and the class was stocks, sauces, and soups. The instructor was clueless. This is a pretty prestigious culinary school and he was teaching us things like using powder mix to make demi-glace to save time. Making roux with flour and water so there wouldn't be added fat. And that for added flavor. When making vegetable stock. Throw in bones and scrap meat from any given animal. We would say yeah. But that's not veggie stock. That's chicken beef stock and he would just get pissy. He was fired after that trimester and we got to take that class again. Mother Ducker made roux with what? That's not roux anymore. It's just ducking dough. He should be crucified for that kind of sin. Right? Lard. Bacon fat. Butter. Hell, even margarine is better than water. He was clueless. Had a human anatomy and physiology teacher that said you get muscle cramps because your muscles dry up and rub against your bones. Oof owie ouch. Who left this bone hurting juice out? Made a rule that no one could wear those sweats that had buttons all the way up the leg in class, no idea why. Then proceeded to rip them off the first student who wore them to his class. A female student. Who wasn't wearing shorts under them. In front of an almost full classroom and a hallway full of students headed to their next class. Well, and then what happened? A fake. Nothing. Though he probably received a talking to by the administration. She was pretty embarrassed. But I don't think she took the issue any farther. He brought a thermos with more whiskey than coffee to work every day. By early afternoon he'd be a reeking, slurring mess. My biology teacher was like this. Only he was a reeking slurring mess from morning. Turned out he'd been in a car accident that killed his wife and 2 infant kids 10 years prior. All he had after that was his dog, Jupiter. That is really ducking sad. I hope he came out the other side of it eventually. For some reason the thing about the dog makes it even sadder. Best comment of the day. I had the same English teacher in middle school and high school. I guess she moved up. Anyway, I was bullied all through school and painfully shy. In middle school, we had to make an individual presentation in class. I was a straight A student, but I just couldn't get up the nerve to present. I told my English teacher I wasn't going to do the presentation, and that I would accept the F in high school. We had to memorize a Shakespeare sonnet. I still remember it perfectly 10+ years later. I took a deep breath, went to the front of the room, and presented Shakespeare to my class. That same English teacher gave me a D because my presentation had no emotion. Oh, I'm so sorry. Is this drama class? I went from being too afraid to speak in class to doing it perfectly. And how did she recognize that? By putting me down. I hate that woman.